of money in the run of a week. Ever since she was released from prison, she had been using. He was sure that she was strung out now. If she kept using drugs, the day would come when she wouldn't find the thought of having one of her girls copulate with a dog repugnant. Porky's common sense cautioned him to be patient. He grinned suddenly. "God damn, Tess, baby. You know I was just joking with you, girl. I didn't think you'd take me serious and get rocks in your jaws, baby." He removed a $10 pack of dope from his pocket and tossed it to her. Tess caught the pack and bit back the acid remark she had been about to make. "Yeah, Porky, just so long as we understand each other," she said, and smiled a knowing smile. Porky glanced across the room at Terry, who was nodding off her dope. Her neat little dress was pushed up around her thighs, revealing golden tan skin just above her stockings. As her head dropped down on her chest, her legs parted slightly, causing Porky to catch his breath. He stared in fascination. Sliding down in his seat, he tried to peep up higher under her dress. His feverish mind began to undress her, until he could visualize her completely naked. He pictured his dog's large head stuck up between her beautiful thighs. As the dog became excited, he imagined Butch biting and growling, his shaggy head shaking from side to side as blood from his bites came running down her legs. Her screams of pain then turned to moans of pleasure as he snatched the dog away and stuck his huge head in its place. Tess punched her woman in the side. As the prostitute turned to see what she wanted, she pointed over at Porky, who was deep into his vivid fantasy. Suddenly becoming aware of his obscene stare, Terry closed her legs and blushed. "Damn," she said to herself. "You're beginning to sit just like some common whore. Legs gaped all open for any man to look under your dress." Perversely, she thought, "Well, the bastard sure couldn't see nothing, no matter how hard he was trying. I should open them real wide. Maybe then the son of a bitch will see enough to get his kicks off." She turned to Minnie. "Honey, I'm going to have to be getting on. I know I got a lot of explaining to do, so I think I better get on home." She stood up and opened her purse. "Porky, how much is a half a fourth?" $30, Terry. But for you, baby, I'll let you have it for 25. Terry counted the money out slowly. Remembering the promise she had made herself earlier, she justified her behavior by telling herself she would slowly cut down her wage until she could buy some medicine to help her kick. Porky disappeared into the bedroom. After closing the door behind him, he removed a small piece of tinfoil and began dumping a measured amount of dope into it. Then he took some pure heroin, uncut, and sprinkled it on top of the amount he had already measured out, making it extra strong. Smokey, sitting on the bed staring into space, watched his movements indifferently. She knew what he was doing, and why he was doing it, and had she attempted to think about it, she would have known what girl he was fixing the potion for. When he finished, he pointed towards the dope. "Don't collect but $25 for it. It goes to Terry." Smokey carried out the dope and gave it to Terry. Terry turned around to call Minnie, but changed her mind. With the help of another addict, Minnie had got a hit up under her armpit, and now she was too involved in shooting the heroin to be disturbed. After paying for the dope, Terry started towards the door. Big Ed, one of Porky's protectors, got up to let her out. The gun resting under his left arm swung conspicuously as he leaned down and peeked through a peephole in the door before allowing her to leave. Big Ed was only one of the gunmen that Porky hired to protect him from the addicts. Without protection, the addicts would have stuck him up every day without fail. Most of the time, his gunmen would be addicts who were known for being vicious and who had the nerve to shoot if so pressured. He kept them supplied with drugs and enough money to take care of their personal needs. Most of the time, they just stayed there with him, not bothering to go elsewhere to sleep. None of them worked regular hours. They would just rotate as the mood hit them. Whenever they felt like it was getting time for a fix, they would trade places with one of the gunmen who had been up all night. That was the main thing about Porky's dope house. It never closed. Dope was sold 24 hours a day. Terry made her way down the stairs. She staggered when she got to the bottom. "Damn," she murmured. This show is a good blow. She made her way to her car and pulled away from the curb slowly. As she drove towards home, she continued to reject one lie after another. Finally, she decided to play it by ear. The dope in her system gave her not only courage, but also a feeling of not really caring what her parents thought about her losing her job. She stopped at a red light and lit a cigarette. Before the light changed, she had dropped the cigarette in her lap twice. Her eyes tried to close, but she fought the desire to nod and drove slowly on. She parked in front of her house and climbed out. There was no worry now, only a desire to get an unpleasant chore over with. When she entered the house, her parents were sitting in the front room, waiting for her. They stared at her curiously. She leaned against the wall and stared back at them. Her father had a solemn look on his face, while her mother seemed to be on the verge of crying at any moment. Her father cleared his throat. "Terry, we want you to explain what the hell is going on. Mrs. Breeding called and told us some very unpleasant news, and we'd like to hear your side of this."
"I knew it! I knew it!" Terry shrilled. "Before you even hear my side of it, you've taken Mrs. Breeding's word for what happened. Now, honey," Terry's mother said soothingly, "your father hasn't accused you of anything, dear. All he did was ask you your side of it." Cold and calculating, Terry stared at her parents. She knew she had her mother won over already, and she could see in her father's face that he wished he were at work or anywhere else except facing his daughter down at this moment. She changed her tactics. Her voice became wheedling. "I didn't do nothing but try and help this girl I used to go to school with, Daddy. She came in the store, and I could see she was sick, you know. I think she uses that stuff. You know, what they call it, dope." Terry could tell by their faces that they were buying it wholeheartedly. "Well, anyway, Mother, the girl was pregnant, and I felt sorry for her. So when she put these dresses in her box, I couldn't bring myself to call the floor walker on her. So I just let her go." She stopped to catch her breath. Her parents' faces were shining with hope. They wanted to believe her so badly that for a moment she felt regret. She had never before resorted to lies when dealing with her parents, but then she had never before been strung out on dope. For a moment she felt like throwing herself in her mother's arms and telling her all of it, how she wished she were a young girl again, so she could lie in her father's protecting arms with no worry in the world. Her mother spoke up hesitantly. "Mrs. Breeding gave us the impression that it was a little different, Terry." A flash of anger shot through her. For a second, she really believed she was the injured one. "Mrs. Breeding, huh?" Terry caught herself in time. She had almost said shit. "I'll tell you about Mrs. Breeding. Do you know how many times I've seen her catch white girls stealing and let them go?" She stared at her mother and saw her nod her head in agreement. "You know about that, don't you, Mother? I know she's told you about it when you're on the phone gossiping." Her mother came to Mrs. Breeding's defense, as Terry knew she would. "Now, Terry, you know she lets young colored girls go, too, if she believes they've been scared enough." Terry snorted. "Well, she didn't want to let this young, pregnant colored girl go today." She turned to her father. "Anyway, Daddy, you know what I mean. You run into the same thing out there where you work. White people do what they want to do, while you do what they tell you to do." Her father nodded his head. "You would have to go to another planet to find a black person who didn't know about discrimination. For the past 15 years, he had been trying to get the crane operator job in his factory, but he was always refused. He'd been complaining for the last 10 years that it was because of his color." "Well, that about covers it, Daddy. If I had been a white girl instead of just some poor black nigger, they wouldn't have done anything, just chewed me out about it." With the timing of a good diplomat, she had used the one word she knew would make her father angry enough to change the whole subject.
"Terry, you know what I've told you about using that word," he said, his neck muscles swelling from anger. "Don't nobody but common-ass Negroes use that word in regards to themselves. It takes the lowest form of humanity to be stupid enough to call themselves something that the dictionary defines as lowlife." Suddenly ashamed at having cursed in front of the two women he loved more than life itself, he walked over and patted his daughter affectionately, but clumsily, on the shoulder. Don't worry about a thing, Terry. You can find another job whenever you get ready. And if you don't want to work, we'll make out."
She turned quickly and started for the stairs. She didn't want them to see the tears that sprang up in her eyes. As she stumbled up the stairway, she felt disgusted with herself. How could she deceive them like that? When she reached the top of the stairs, tears were running down her cheeks unchecked. Terry sat on her bed, her head bowed, completely ashamed of her behavior. As if with a will of their own, her fingers began to move toward her purse, and before she was fully aware of it, she had taken out her package of heroin and opened it. Using a fingernail file, she scooped up a large amount of the white poison and snorted it. She seemed to be watching her motions from a distance outside her body. It was as though someone else were snorting the drug, and she was just an innocent bystander. She failed to notice the opening of the bedroom door as she continued to snort the dope. She drifted into another world, free of worry and responsibility. Her eyes had become small pinpoints, while her spirit took off in a flight of euphoria. Her father's shocked voice brought her back to reality.
"What is that stuff? What in the world are you doing? Terry! Terry, my Terry! You can't be using dope!"
He continued, seeing it before his eyes, but not yet wanting to believe what he saw.
"My God, this can't be you, Terry! Why, some kid brought up in the slum, yes, I could understand that, but not you, Terry! Not you! Why, you ain't never wanted for nothing. I used to work 2 jobs so that you and your mother could have anything you wanted."
Tears began to run down his face. His voice became hoarse, and then finally, anger came.
"Give me that stuff, Terry! Give it here!"
Terry moved as though her world was crashing down. She jumped to the end of the bed, clutching the heroin to her bosom. Her eyes were dilating with fear, while her nose seemed to expand with each breath. Her mother stood against the door, staring dumbfounded, her hand clutching at her heart. She repeated over and over, as though it were a song, "It ain't true, honey. Not my little girl. Tell me it ain't true." Consumed by anger, her father snarled at her.
"You no good little bitch! Then it was all true. Every goddamn word of it was true, and you come in here telling your goddamn lies, and we believe every word of it."
Father and daughter stared at each other across the room. Terry, out of fear of losing the small amount of heroin that promised her she wouldn't wake up sick, didn't even think about trying to use reason with him. All her mind could grasp was the danger to her heroin. She knew that once her father got hold of it, she would never get it back. Her father's voice became low, filled with disgust.
"Either you give me that dope, Terry, or get out of my house. I'm not going to have anyone living under my roof who takes that stuff."
The words were like ice water in her face, but she knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that she could not part with her drugs. "Well, if that's the case," she said slowly, "I hope you will leave me some privacy while I pack." Before the words were even out of her mouth, her mother slumped over and would have fallen if it had not been for her husband. He caught her and held her up.
"I'm going to take your mother to her bedroom. When I return, Terry, I want you out of my house."
Terry grabbed a few things and tossed them in a suitcase. She knew she would have to move fast before her father returned, because there was the possibility of his asking for the car keys. With the thought of losing her car in her mind, she raced around the room, gathering up only the things she knew she must have. In a few minutes, she was finished and on her way down the stairs. 11. Teddy and Snake sat in the car waiting impatiently for Dirty Red and Tiny Tim to come out of the department store. The store closed at 9 o'clock, and they both knew their friends would have to come out before some of the doors were locked. Teddy glanced at the cheap watch he wore.
"They got 5 minutes to make it, Snake."
"I don't like it," Snake replied. "They should have been out of there 20 minutes ago. I told them before they went in that the store had private cops, and all of them wore guns."
"You know how they feel about private cops, Snake. A goddamn store cop ain't no different than nobody else. If you gonna play,
You got to be able to play on floor walkers and private cops alike. Snake snorted. There's one hell of a difference, Teddy, and that's that fucking gun the cops wear. With cops on the scene, man, if you run, you're taking your life in your hands. With a floor walker, you got a chance of knocking the son of a bitch down and getting away. Both men became silent as they worried over what was keeping their friends. It was in the air. They could almost smell it. Their senses were so sharp from stealing every day that they could feel a bust. On entering a store, they could read roller in the most innocent-looking floor walker. Now both of them had just about reached the conclusion that their friends had been busted. Suddenly, there was some commotion in the front of the department store. From where they sat, they could see everything that happened. Tiny Tim had come out of the store first, clutching something under his coat. At his heels was a white man. As soon as they reached the pavement, the man grabbed his arm. Dirty Red, coming out of the store behind the white man, made a blurring motion towards his pocket, causing both of the men in the car to groan. The floor walker never knew what hit him. Red shot him in the back twice. As the man slid down to the ground, Red and Tim broke and ran, a box falling from under Tim's coat. Snake cursed. The damn fools! They heading straight for the car. Before he could get over his astonishment, two men in blue uniforms rushed from the store with drawn guns. Their yells of rage filled the night. Halt! Halt or we'll shoot! Before the words had cleared the cop's mouth, his partner had aimed and shot. Red staggered, then tried to regain his balance, but another blow in the back hurled him to the pavement. As Tim passed his fallen body, he seemed to tumble. Two more shots rang out, and Tim pitched over on his face. Good God Almighty, Teddy moaned. They done both went and got killed. Snake jumped out of the car and rushed towards the crowd of people that was gathering beside his fallen friends. From the fringe of the crowd, he could tell that both his friends were dead. Neither man moved, and from the murmuring of the people nearest the bodies, he knew they wouldn't have to worry about any more fixes. Teddy joined him, and they stood silently. They waited until after the ambulance had come and gone before returning to the car. Well, Teddy said, breaking the silence, at least Red did kill him a peck of wood before going. That ain't worth shit, Snake growled. Dirty Red is gone, and killing a peck of wood ain't gonna make no difference. When you dead, you're done. They drove for a while in silence. Finally, Teddy spoke up. We ain't got nothing to sell, Snake. What we gonna do about a do? My nose is already running, man, and we ain't got a slug. Your nose is always running, Teddy, so that ain't nothing new. He remained silent for a while, but his next words let Teddy know that he was thinking about the same thing. Porky ought to give us a blow-on credit after we tell him the news. Yeah, man. He ought to give us one free. All the money Red and Tim and us done spent with him, I know it should at least be worth a free due when we tell him he done lost 2 customers. With the thought of a free fix in his mind, Snake began to drive a little faster. The money they had spent already that day with Porky should have been enough for a fix on credit, Snake reasoned. He desperately tried to find grounds to support his argument in case Porky turned them down. Among the 4 of them, they had already spent over $200 that day. As they pulled up and parked in front of Porky's, Teddy noticed Terry's car parked in front of the hotel across the street. He cursed under his breath. One of these days, he thought, I'll get a chance to fix a little red wagon, and I'll fix it damn good. That your ex-girlfriend's ride parked over there, Teddy? Snake asked coldly. Yeah, that's the bitch's car. Teddy answered shortly. Why you break up, Teddy? If I'd had me a sassy little piece like that, I might even have given up shooting stuff. Nigga, you ain't gonna give up shooting dope till you as dead as Tim and Red, Teddy replied harshly. Snake tossed back his head and laughed loudly as they started to climb the stairway. My, man. You still got your nose open for that young bitch, ain't you? She sure must have had some good loving to keep a dope fiend's nose open. He laughed again, then added more seriously, It's really your fault that you blew her, Teddy. I don't know what you was thinking about, making a dope fiend out of her. You knew she was going to become a motherfucking dog once she got strung out. That's all right, Teddy replied hotly. I fixed the smart ass up properly. I put something on her ass she'll never forget. Every time that bitch gets sick, she'll think about me being the cause of it. Snake stopped at the head of the stairs and looked back at him strangely. I guess you did fix that. But you made a snake out of her. And damn if you wasn't the first one she bit. Gigi, one of Porky's doormen, opened the door. He watched them closely as they entered, then closed the door behind them. Where's Porky at? Snake asked quickly. Gigi nodded towards the door. I think he's sleeping, Snake. We gotta see him, Teddy said, with fear balling up in his stomach. The thought of Porky not being available had not entered their minds. Without any apparent concern, Gigi stared coldly at them. I don't see how you gonna see him, dig, if he sleep. I ain't about to wake him up over nothing, dig? If you want something, Smokey can take care of it, dig? If you don't want nothing, you might as well let the dough hit you in the ass, 'cause Porky done said all that laying out around his dope house has got to cease, dig? Teddy stared up at Gigi, up at him. Gigi was a touch hot. He liked to fight. It really didn't make any difference to him who it was, either. He didn't pick his people. Snake came in with that smoothing ability of his to sway anyone. Dig, Gigi. We got some bad news for Porky, man. All of us was taken off a joint, and the fuzz busted down on us and shot Dirty Red and Tim. Now we need someone with the knowledge to call them white folks and find out did they do any talking before they died, or are they dead? Can you dig that? This rang a bell with Gigi. From living in the narrow world of a dope house, he was starved for gossip. Most of the time, they talked about what other addicts were doing, who was doing time, and who just got busted. News about anyone just getting killed, or taking an overdose, was always exciting enough to kick around for the next week or two. The room full of addicts had started buzzing over Snake's comment. The only person who didn't seem excited was Smokey. She was sitting in Porky's chair with a king-sized cooker, full of dope, trying to find a vein. Gigi spoke to her. You want to tell Porky, Smokey? She looked up at him, with eyes that had seen everything. So what? 2 fucking dope fiends got killed. Big deal. They die every fucking day. Now what you want me to do, run all over the house shouting the news? Teddy stared at her, surprised. It was the first time he had ever heard Smokey say that many words before. Her reply had struck him dumb. He was at a loss for words to make her do what he so desperately wanted. Taking her reply in stride, Snake spoke to her coldly. Get on up, bitch, and wake Porky up. When you come back, I'll hit you in the pocket. I don't want no shit out of you when I get back, Snake. You don't promise to hit me, and I'm going to hold you to it, Smokey said as she got up and walked towards the bedroom. It was hard for her to get someone to hit her, because most of her veins were shot out. Sometimes it took better than an hour before she could find a vein to hit in. Snake walked over and stared down at her cooker of dope. The dope was covered with blood from where she had tried to find a hit. He pulled the spike out. On the arm of the chair, beside the cooker, was a package of dope. He started to reach for it, but Big Ed's voice stopped him. You can find something easier to steal than that, Snake. All you got to do is look in a better place. Say, somewhere that ain't connected with this house. Big Ed smiled at him from the couch. I know you dig what I'm talking about. You sure look out for Porky's stuff, don't you? Snake replied sharply. If you was to ever pay us as well as he does, we would look out for yours the same way, Gigi said, not wanting to be outdone. Smokey came out of the bedroom, followed closely by Porky, who was dressed in a white bathrobe large enough to be a tent. His small, pig-like eyes were red from lack of sleep, and from his expression, you could tell he didn't like the idea of being woken up. This bullshit Smokey was mumbling about better be the real deal, he growled as he crossed the room. I don't want to find out you tricked her into waking me up, just so you could hit for some stuff. Snake quickly explained what had happened, wording it to give the impression they had been in the store, too. He gave Porky the name of the department store, so he could call and find out what had happened. Knowing that Porky loved gossip, he gave him just enough information to get him aroused. Porky disappeared into the bedroom.
After about 10 minutes, he reappeared. "God damn almighty!" he exclaimed. "Both them dope fiends done went and got themselves killed." He seemed about to burst with the news. "And that ain't all. Them fools went and killed a honky. The people just told me the whitey died on the way to the hospital. They wanted to know who the hell I was, so I told them I was Tim's daddy." He stopped to catch his breath. They didn't seem to know anything about nobody else being there. I asked if anybody else was with them, but they went to Nut City on me. He stared at Snake and Teddy as though he'd just noticed them. "I don't know what you're gonna do now. Them stores gonna be hot as hell from here on out." Smokey took off her blouse and raised her arm so Snake could try to hit the vein under her armpit. The brassiere she wore was black around the edges from constant wear. Her breasts were so tiny, her brassiere fitted her the way a woman's bra would have fit a child of 10. Without taking his eyes off what he was doing, Snake spoke out of the side of his mouth. "We ain't worried about tomorrow, Porky. What we need is a fix now. We'll be able to get out in the morning and do some hustling." "I don't know," Porky said as he became alert. "How much are you on my books?" "I don't owe you but $15, Snake replied slowly. He clamped down on his jaw to keep it from shaking. Teddy, seeing a chance to cop a blow even if his partner didn't, spoke up quickly. "I don't owe you nothing, Porky. I paid my bill up when I sold you them bed sheets." The subtle inference wasn't lost on Snake. Teddy's eagerness to cop, even though Snake might not get anything, didn't anger him. He knew he would have done the same thing if circumstances had been reversed. Blood gushed up into the work Snake was using as he hit a vein in Smokey's armpit. He cursed as he applied pressure, and the works refused to function. For a minute, he was afraid the tools were stopped up, but just as quickly as they had stopped, they began to work. He pressed down on the bulb. Slowly the dope ran out of the dropper and into her vein. He held the needle between two of his fingers tightly as he removed the dropper from the end of the needle. Keeping the needle firmly embedded in her vein, he refilled the dropper and stuck it back on the spike. "Give them both a $10 pack, Gigi," Porky ordered, finally breaking the silence. "I don't know what you gonna do next time, and don't give a fuck. If your mammies both die before you pay me, don't come asking for no credit." Porky started to walk back towards the bedroom and stopped. "I don't know if you know it or not, Teddy, but your woman's old man caught her with some dope tonight and put her little smart ass out." For a brief moment, anger at Terry's father invaded Teddy's selfish thoughts. Deep down, he knew he still cared for her, but the way they had parted made him want to take a petty revenge on her. He wanted to hurt her, not because she had hurt him, but because he still loved her and couldn't admit it. On the end table, beside the couch, was a glass of water filled with works. Teddy picked out his set and skeeted water out of the needle. The water came out slowly, so he picked up another set. He continued until he found a set that was open. When he skeeted the water out, the needle was unclogged. Teddy cooked up all of his $10 pack and drew it up in the dropper. He found a vein, hit, sat back, and cleaned up the works before Snake had even finished hitting Smokey. He sat and nodded, waiting patiently for Snake. Snake hadn't spent his time in vain. When he finished helping Smokey, he begged her out of a little girl, cocaine, and mixed it with his horse after he cooked up the heroin. He dropped the cocaine down on top of the heroin, and it quickly dissolved without the aid of heat. "God damn, baby," Teddy drawled. "I wish I knew you was gonna fix up a speedball. Why don't you leave the cotton wet for me?" Snake flexed the muscle of his arm until one of his veins began to stand out. From the muscular contours of his arm, it was easy to tell he had once been a powerfully built man. His constant use of dope had caused his large-framed body to appear undernourished. He pushed the needle deep into a vein on his first try. A dark flow of blood filled the dropper. He loosened the tie around his arm and slowly pressed on the dropper until the blood and heroin in the dropper disappeared. "You hoggish son of a bitch!" Teddy yelled, disgruntled. "You done shot up all the coke!" The shot quickly took effect. Snake sat back and relaxed as though he didn't have a care in the world. He grinned over at Teddy. "Damn, baby," he drawled slowly.
I really forgot about you, man. A while later, both men left the apartment. A freezing rain had begun to fall. They clutched their collars around their necks and ran for the car. It was early morning, and a chilling wind had begun to blow along with the rain, announcing the coming of winter. Teddy waited until Snake had started up the car and turned on the heater. I don't know about you, Snake, but I'd like to see if we can ride down on a Sting before we call it a night. It ain't no later than 2 o'clock, so we got plenty of time to see if we can rip something off before daylight. I've been thinking, Teddy, about what happened today. I think I done had enough of boosting to last me a lifetime. Snake lit up a cigarette. If we could take off a big enough score, we could buy some dope and start dealing. The way we're going now, it ain't nothing but a matter of time before something happens to us. That sounds sweet as a motherfucker, Teddy replied quickly. Only I ain't got the slightest idea where we gonna find a Sting big enough to put us in business. He thought about the idea a little more, then continued, if we had the money, I know where we could cop some good stuff at. But the man don't do nothing but wholesale, so we have to have at least a bill before copping from him. A bill? Snake exclaimed. I ain't talking about no funky $100. I know where a joint is at that we can take off, man, that's got big stuff in it. If you got the heart to get down with me, Teddy, by morning, either we'll have big stuff, say something like $600 or $700, or we'll be in some fucking precinct station. Rain spattered on the windshield in a continuous downpour. If we can get our hands on just $500, Teddy replied, trying to keep the excitement out of his voice, we'd be able to support our habits with no problem at all. We would be able to do a whole lot better than just support our habits, baby, Snake retorted, while his fingers beat out a rhythm on the steering wheel. The way I got it figured, Teddy, if Porky can support that oil burner Smokey got, we should have no problem taking care of ours, plus making a few ends. Shit, Snake, that bag Porky got is so big he could take care of 5 habits like Smokey's and still make money. That's where you wrong, Snake said, as he drove slowly through the deserted streets. He made a right turn and hit the John Lodge freeway. Porky's got a big bag, true enough, but it ain't that goddamn big. Where he makes his money at is on his ability to never run out of dope. You can make money with a small bag if you don't allow yourself to run out of stuff. Man, you could always rap, Teddy said loudly. If a man listened to you, you could make him believe shit don't stink. Here I am, 2 o'clock in the morning without 50 cents in my pocket, and you got me believing that in the morning all we gonna have to worry about is where we can cop at. Snake grinned. If that connect you're talking about is any good, we'll have plenty dope to shoot up this time tomorrow. His voice was full of assurance. In his mind, he had reached the point of either taking off a big score or ending up in prison. There was no middle road. Being a dope fiend, he had to have it. Teddy was a willing partner. He too had reached the point of do or die. What we gonna take off, Snake? We gonna be a joint this morning? There was no hesitation in his voice. There was only curiosity as to what kind of crime they were going to commit. For a few minutes, Teddy thought Snake hadn't heard him. He continued to drive without answering until he pulled up the ramp leaving the expressway. We gon' crash a joint this morning, baby. Crash, crash, crash. Without warning, Teddy's stomach started to act up. He could feel butterflies taking off inside him. For a moment, he feared he might lose his dinner. It wasn't really fear, even though he had never crashed a joint before. He was too much a dope fiend to have an actual fear of breaking the law. It was the idea of the rip. He was up on what he had to do. He'd been around too long not to know what a crash meant. He was aware that, when you crashed, the whole thing depended on speed, if you didn't want to get caught in a freak bust. He watched the neighborhood closely as Snake drove slowly through an all-white suburb. Snake turned up into a shopping center that was well lit but deserted. He parked in front of an appliance store with a large display of portable television sets and radios. After furtively glancing around, both men stepped from the car. There was no hesitation in either of them. They had come for a purpose, and now they moved toward it professionally. Snake carried a tire iron he had taken from under the front seat. As soon as that goddamn light changes and that car pulls off, I'm going to take care of business, Teddy. When you go in the window, man, don't hand me nothing but portable TVs, baby." His voice was hoarse with excitement. With a quick nod, Teddy agreed, never taking his eyes from the street and the car at the light. As soon as the light changed and the car pulled away, he heard a crash. Most of the front window of the store began to fall out. With 3 quick blows, Snick had the window clear of glass. Before the sound of falling glass had diminished, Teddy was through the window. He returned almost instantly and pushed 2 television sets towards the waiting hands. When Snake returned from the car, there were 2 more waiting for him. He rushed back to the car with them in his arms. Quickly, the back seat of the car filled with the sets. "No more room, Teddy?" he yelled, taking 2 more television sets and running for the car. He was still trying to find room for them in the front seat when Teddy joined him, carrying 4 transistor radios. "Hurry, Snake, hurry!" Teddy screamed as he frantically climbed over the televisions in the front seat. "A car stopped out front and is backing up fast." His urging was not necessary. Snake had seen the car when he ran around the front of his own. It only added wings to his feet. There was never any thought of not running. Snake leaped in the car and put it into gear. He had never cut the motor off. As he sped away from the store, he saw the other car pull into the shopping center. He raced for the exit, his foot glued to the gas pedal. The other car pulled up in front of the store and stopped. Teddy, leaning out the window watching, yelled, "Take it easy, baby. It was just some old fake kids. I think they're getting in on the action." "You sure, Teddy? You sure?" Snake asked anxiously as he pulled out onto the street. "Slow it down, Snake. We got him made," Teddy replied as he twisted around in the seat and resumed a normal position. "I saw a couple of them woods come out with televisions." Snake slowed down and began to breathe easier. Teddy turned and examined their loot. "We got him made, baby!" he exclaimed happily. "We got 4 color TVs and 6 black and whites. We ain't got no problem then. We got enough to buy the dope, plus get a flat to deal it from," Snake answered softly. 12. Porky walked up and down his flat. He would pace a while, then sit down, but before 10 minutes had passed, he was back up again. He stared out the window, hoping he would see his Cadillac pull up. He couldn't remember ever having seen it like this before. Ever since the bust in New York of over 100 kilos of dope, the problem of copying dope had gotten worse and worse. His connection had been out for over a week now, but he had been managing to hold on somehow. Porky stopped his pacing again to stare out the window impatiently. Smokey had been gone since early morning with Big Ed driving, trying to run down some dope. He wasn't worried about the $5,000 of his money she had. What none of the addicts knew was that Smokey was really his legal wife, in addition to being his connect. She took care of all his personal business. When he sent money to the bank, she took it. The thought of the $50,000 he had socked away didn't bring him any satisfaction. Porky didn't deal for the money anymore. It was nice, true enough, but he loved the power it brought him. The life or death power. He held the future of every dope fiend who came through his door in the palm of his hand. If he wanted to kill them, all he would have to do was give them some strychnine. To give a drug addict a hot shot was the simplest thing in the world. He saw 2 carloads of dope fiends pull up in front of his house. His lips pulled back in a sneer, and he turned from the window in disgust. Everywhere he looked, there were dope fiends. His apartment was full of them, sitting around, waiting, more impatient than he was. They were on the floor, sitting against the wall. The room was full of them. Tess was sitting near the door on the floor with one of her girlfriends. "Tess," Porky snarled, "go down and tell them fools ain't nothing happening." She got up from the floor and did as she was bidden. She was well aware that now was not the time to get smart. Like most of the other addicts, she figured that, if any of the pushers scored sometime soon, it would be Porky. They all knew Smokey was out trying to get down, and with the oil burner she had on her back, there was little doubt about her taking care of business. If there was any dope in the city, she would find it. Before the addicts could reach the front porch, Tess stepped out of the door in front of them. Y'all might as well save yourselves a trip, 'cause Porky ain't got no stuff." As they stopped and stared up at her stupidly, she quickly added, "He also said to tell you he ain't got no room for y'all to lay around and wait, so keep on pushing." As the crowd of junkies turned around to leave, someone in the crowd called her a bitch. Tess just stared without anger. She knew how they felt, because she felt the same way. Her nose and eyes were running, while her bowels had become undependable. When she sat down, she felt like getting up, and as soon as she got up, she felt like lying down. Hot and cold flashes ran through her, while under her skin it felt like small insects were crawling around. As the junkies piled into the car to continue their endless search, Tess noticed the look of desperation on their faces and knew that it was the mirror image of her own. They would continue searching for the rest of the night and the following day until they found what they sought. They were now at the point where they would shoot morphine, take yellow jackets or Nembutal capsules, anything to take the edge off. Paregoric would help those who knew how to cook off the alcohol and strain out the camphor. Then it would be fit to inject intravenously. Many of those upstairs had already bought cough medicine with cocaine in it, while the few fortunate ones had come with some Dilaudid, and others had some precious Dianine. Methadone pills were selling for $3 a pill, number 10s, while number 5s were bringing $2. Tess's stomach lurched as she gaped at the long midnight blue Cadillac pulling up out front. "Oh, God," she murmured under her breath. "Let it be them." Before the car completely stopped at the curb, the back door flew open and Smokey came hurtling out. The chilling winter wind whirled around her, tossing light snowflakes over the front of her dress. Her thin fall coat spread out behind her like a cape as she ran toward the front of the house. There was nothing slow-moving about her now. She moved with the speed of a young doe. A car full of addicts pulled up behind the Cadillac. They had seen Big Ed driving Porky's car up on the main street and had followed, in the blind hope that Smokey had been lucky enough to break the panic. If anyone could, they believed it would be one of Porky's connections. Big Ed and the other doorman riding shotgun hurriedly followed Smokey toward the house. The sight of so many addicts only clenched the idea in the other addicts' minds. Drug addicts didn't make it a point to run unless something really important was up. Tess spotted the package Smokey clutched in her hand, then turned and ran up the stairs, one step in front of the rushing Smokey. The occupants of the two cars had been seen by Porky from the front window. He cursed as he motioned towards the door. "Goddamn dope fiends running all over the street like they're crazy. Why don't you get the fucking door open before the foolish sons of bitches break it down?" The sound of thundering footsteps running up the stairs was a rarity, because at any other time, Porky would have had a fit about someone running up his stairway. Because of the panic, though, he realized it was impossible to restrict such abandoned behavior. The addicts in the apartment looked as though someone had given them a new lease on life. Before, they had been sprawled out on the floor listlessly. Now, as the news spread that Smokey was back, they all sat up, losing their bewildered look, caught up in the anticipation of drugs being plentiful again. Terry, sitting on the couch beside Minnie, asked in a hushed voice, "Do you really think they copped?" They had been waiting for over 30 hours now, neither woman leaving her spot on the couch, afraid that if they left, they couldn't get back in. Minnie had been hoping and praying that Smokey would cop, but she was afraid now to become too excited, aware that if Smokey hadn't copped, she would have to commit herself to a hospital or kick cold turkey. Smokey came through the door and headed straight toward the bedroom. The addicts surrounded Tess, asking questions. The word spread through the room that Smokey had copped. Big Ed made his way across the room and entered the bedroom, closing the door behind him. Inside the bedroom, everything was already laid out on the bed. A large mirror with a sifter lying beside it was already in place for use when the time came. Small amounts of milk sugar had been meticulously measured out and placed out of the way on the edge of the mirror. By the time Big Ed entered the bedroom, he had to step over Smokey's coat in the middle of the floor, where she had dropped it in her hurry to reach the bed. She was propped up on the edge of the bed, sifting heroin through the sifter. She ran the drug through until there were no more lumps in it. She continued to strain it until she had it just the way she wanted it. As Smokey worked, her mind was busy. It had been a long time since they had allowed themselves to get caught like this, but it was one of the hazards of being a drug user. Whenever a really big bust went down, The users in the streets paid dearly for it. The panic had reached nationwide proportions. She smiled to herself as she thought how lucky she was to have a man like Porky. He had made sure she would have some kind of dope to keep her sickness off.
"How many will it take?"
Porky asked impatiently from the side of the bed.
"It won't take much more than a 4-cut and steel be anything,"
Smokey replied, not stopping her hands moving smoothly. Porky opened the envelope she had given him, quickly counted the money, then counted it again.
"Hell, it ain't but $3 left in here, Smoke."
"The bastard charged $1 for each piece, Porky," she answered, not bothering to look up. The thought never entered her mind that he would doubt her, and he didn't.
"God damn, that's twice as much as this pure is worth."
Porky quickly calculated up the price he had paid for the dope.
"Ed, you go out there and tell them junkies that I ain't selling nothing but $20 packs. You can also tell them that if they ain't but one goddamn penny short, they can't cop."
His barrage of words didn't surprise Smokey in the least. She knew him so well, she could have bet he would raise the price. It was all a matter of business, though. They had had to pay double price for the junk, so, quite naturally, they would have to up their price.
"Send Dave in here to pack up this shit, too,"
Porky yelled at Big Ed as he went out the door. Smokey finished cutting the dope, walked over to the dresser, and took out her works and cooker. She removed a small spoon from the drawer. "You gonna use the $10 spoon, Porky, to measure up the $20 packs?"
"You goddamn right I am," he growled. "What you think I was gonna use, bitch, a quarter spoon?"
She ignored his outburst and went back to the bed to fill her cooker up with stuff. Dave entered the room without knocking. He was short and thin, a brown-skinned man nearing 50. His hair was almost completely gray, while his thin mustache was speckled with gray. Porky picked up 2 album covers and dropped them on the bed. He sat down across from the pile of dope.
"I want you to pack up all that stuff, Dave, and I'll give you a blow when you finish. Don't let your fingers get sticky," he added, "'cause I'll be right here on the case."
Big Ed stuck his head in the door.
"You want me to start collecting some of this money, Porky? Everybody out here keeps trying to push it in my hand. Seems they got the idea they might not cop before you run out. Not yet, Ed. Tell them fools we ain't gonna run out no time soon, so rest easy."
Porky wished the words were true as he said them. He knew the dope would last a while, because he had 10 pieces, but as big as his business was, he'd be out of dope in less than 2 days. Gigi came into the room in time to answer the phone.
"Is Snake on the line, Porky? He wants to know if you're all right."
With a grotesque smile, revealing his yellow teeth, Porky reached for the phone.
Well, well, well. If it ain't the big dope dealer himself, what can I do for you, King Snake?
On the other end of the line, Snake could feel the blood rushing to his head. Instantly, the thought ran through his mind. They got some dope.
"You all right, Porky?"
he asked, unable to control the pleading note in his voice. All at once, Porky began to laugh. The feeling of importance filled his very being. He could almost reach out and touch the vibration of fear in Snake's voice. He knew Snake was afraid of being denied the opportunity to cop from this more influential dealer. For a moment, Porky toyed with the idea of just turning him down, but his capricious disposition, mixed with his greed, was too much.
"The only thing I can let you have, Snake,"
Porky said, his agile mind adding swiftly,
"is a piece of cut stuff."
On the other end of the line, Snake caught his breath. A piece of stuff? He hadn't hoped for such good luck. He glanced around the room at the addicts watching him. He could almost make his money back off of them.
"How much, Porky?" $400 for one piece," Porky replied, then added, making sure he had his fish caught in the net, "I'm selling $10 packs for $20 right now, Snake, so you shouldn't have no problem getting your money back out of it."
Porky mentally counted up his initial investment. After spending $1,000 for a piece of pure, cutting it 4 times, which gave him 5 pieces, selling one of those cut pieces for $400, he was left with 4 pieces of cut dope. At that rate, he would have paid $600 for 4 pieces of cut dope. When he broke that down, it would come out to about $150 apiece. Not bad at all, he reasoned, as he waited for Snake's reply.
After a short debate with Teddy, Snake hurriedly answered, "We on our way, Porky. Hold that piece for us." He hung the phone up and spoke to one of the dope fiends in his overcrowded apartment. "If anyone comes to the door, Jake, tell them I went to cop. I'll be back in an hour." He hesitated for a moment. "Don't let nobody else in, though, until we get back. Just tell them everything's going to be all right." Teddy spoke up from the door. "You better tell them it ain't gonna be no more $10 packs. All we gonna have is $20 packs, or 3 cops for $15. They left the apartment together. Neither man was sick. They had bought some paregoric earlier and cooked it up. That bastard is sticking it to a snake. 400 fat ones for some cut stuff? How much you figure we can make out of it? Snake remained silent, counting to himself. The way I got it figured, Teddy, is that we can get at least 20 packs out of a fourth of dope. All right. We gonna get 4/4 out of a piece. So that should give us at least 80 packs. 80 packs at $20 a pack should bring us somewhere near 1,600. I'm not counting what we would use ourselves, but there's plenty room. They climbed in the late-model car Snake had bought since they started dealing. It wasn't brand new, but it was only 2 years old, and still ran smoothly. Snake started the motor up, but before he could back up, a car full of addicts pulled up beside him. "You all right?" one of the dope fiends yelled out of the back window. "I'll be back with some skag in less than an hour," Snake replied. "You sure, Snake? We've been hearing that same bullshit for the past 2 days now. Every goddamn body will be right back, but we don't never see nobody coming in the door with it." "Don't worry," Snake answered. "I ain't just talking out the side of my neck. I done already called, and the stuff is there. Only thing about it is that it's gonna cost $20 for a $10 pack, and we ain't giving up no credit." A noisy chorus of voices answered him. Most of the addicts were angry over the extravagant price, but their mutterings died down as the thought sank in that Snake really was on his way to pick up some dope. The driver pulled the car out of the way so Snake could get past. Before he could get away from the curb, a cab pulled up beside him with 2 women in it, one white and one colored. "Snake!" the colored woman yelled. "You all right, honey?" she asked while wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Yes, Shirley. Everything's sweet as it could be." Before he finished speaking, she was climbing out of the cab. Her partner paid the driver and jumped out on the other side. Snake raised his eyebrows at the other girl. "She's all right," Shirley said, coming up beside the car. "We work out at the same hotel. She left a man a couple of days ago, so we've been staying together." "Do she use?" Teddy asked from the passenger side of the car. "Carrie," Shirley said as soon as her girlfriend walked up. "That little man over there wants to know if you use." Carrie laughed lightly. She was tall and blonde, with a long, keen nose and pale blue eyes. As she leaned down, Teddy could tell she used because her eyes were beginning to run, and she kept sniffling. "Fuck all that shit," Snake said, and opened the car door. "Come on. We got business to take care of." Both women climbed into the back of the car. Teddy turned around in the seat and stared at Shirley. She was a tall, light-colored woman with a dazzling smile. She'd been on stuff for over a year, but it had not caught up with her yet. She still had a beautiful shape and was able to make quite a bit of money whoring out of the large white hotels downtown. She was one of the few black women Teddy had ever seen with freckles. "Your friend work downtown with you, Shirley?" he asked, as Snake pulled away from the curb. "Yeah, baby, and she's the only cool fay down there, too." Shirley lit a cigarette before adding, "Would you believe that a good whore like her ain't got no man, either?" Without turning his head, Snake growled, "You 2 whores ain't nothing but sisters under the skin, Shirley. What you got planned? You choose me and Carrie ends up with Teddy?" Both women laughed. Now that the fear of not copping was over, both women started to relax. "What's wrong with that, Snake?" Shirley asked. "Nothing. Except I know that you're a bad, chasing bitch, and it looks like your partner might be following in your footsteps," Snake answered coldly. Ever since they started dealing, women had been no problem. Each night, they would have to run the female drug addicts out before they went to sleep. He turned on the block where Porky lived and parked. The street was jammed with cars.
Everywhere he looked, he could see a car full of addicts waiting for their buyer to come back. Teddy cursed.
Damn! You don't have to worry about whether or not Porky got any stuff. Just look at the cars. Man, every dope fiend in the city must be at his house. I better hurry up before he changes his mind, too, Snake answered as he climbed out. You gonna wait until I get back, Teddy? Yeah, man. I think I'll keep the women company. You ain't gonna shoot no stuff while you in there, are you?
The question went unanswered, because Snake was already on his way across the street. When he finally got inside the apartment, he almost had to fight his way through the milling crowd. Addicts were everywhere. Minnie and Terry were still in the apartment. They had finally got waited on. Minnie split the $20 pack. Terry stared at her small amount. She realized that it would not be enough to take her sickness off if she snorted it. Minnie read her mind. You better get you a set of works, honey, if you want to feel that dope. For a moment, a feeling of being utterly lost washed over her. In the back of her mind, she knew she was getting ready to go over the last barrier. There was no way around it. She had to get rid of her junk sickness, and the dope she had was not enough. As she stared at it, she wondered if it would be enough even if she shot it. Could I use that set of works you had? She asked the addict sitting next to her. He removed a neatly wrapped bundle from his coat pocket. Just be sure you clean them out when you finish using them, he said, and held his set of tools out to her. When Snake passed the couch, he stopped for a moment and stared as an addict hit Terry in the arm. As he pressed the dropper, her eyes closed. Snake walked on past. It was just another step down the line for her, he thought. Not surprising, really. Just about any user would eventually start shooting instead of snoring, if he had any veins to go in. In the long run, it was a whole lot cheaper to shoot than to snort. He reached the bedroom door and knocked.
Who the hell is that now?
A voice yelled from the other side of the door. Snake tried the door. When it opened under his hand, he walked in.
What's happening, Porky? What's the real deal?
He yelled across the bedroom. Porky was busy trying to hit his woman in the groin.
What's wrong with you, nigga? Don't you believe in waiting until someone lets you in a door?
He snarled. The day's events had just about worn Porky out. He had never seen the likes of this before. His two dogs stood up and growled as Snake walked across the floor.
You still got that piece for me, ain't you, Porky?
He asked nervously. Porky nodded towards Big Ed, who was standing in front of a mirror, trying to hit in the neck.
He got it. If I had known it was going to be like this, Snake, I'd never have sold that piece to you.
Before Porky could change his mind, Snake pulled out his money and started counting out the $400. He walked over to the dresser and laid the money in front of Big Ed.
You think you'll have enough to sell me another piece tomorrow, Porky? Hell no, Porky exclaimed. Fuck no. You're getting a goddamn break on this fourth now. You think I'll go for the same fucking thing again tomorrow?
Pulling the needle out of Smokey's groin, Porky cursed.
This goddamn bitch ain't got no veins nowhere. Should make her take a funky ass to the hospital and kick.
How about trying and find a hit for me, Snake? Smokey asked, her voice rising slightly. Her hand shook as she held the works out toward him.
You might be able to hit that same vein as the last time you hit me. I ain't been back in this since, 'cause I don't just let anybody hit me under the arm.
She pulled her dress down and stood up. For a brief moment, Snake wanted to say no, but after looking at her face, he knew he couldn't turn her down. He waited until she removed her blouse and raised her arm. As he probed for the vein with his finger, he thought cruelly to himself, at least the bitch changed bras since the last time. After about 10 minutes, he finally hit a vein. The dark blood that filled up the dropper told him he had a hit. Before the works had time to clog up, he pushed down slightly on the bulb, and the blood and dope disappeared in the hidden vein under a mass of dark hair. Before Snake reached the car, Porky had received a long-distance call from Chicago. He was now beginning to get some action on all the calls he had made in the past few days. He talked quietly into the receiver for a few moments, shook his head in agreement, then hung up. He walked slowly towards the door and opened it.
Everybody out, he said.
As Big Ed passed him, he whispered, "Get ready, Ed. We'll be leaving for Chicago in the next few minutes." As soon as the room emptied,